On September 17, 2023, a chilling call sent officers racing to a quiet suburban home in Romeoville, Illinois. What began as a routine welfare check quickly spiraled into a nightmare no one could have anticipated. The call came from a worried mother. Her voice trembled as she explained, "My daughter, Saida Bolome, lives at 512 Concord Avenue, Romeoville, Illinois. We haven't heard from her, her husband, or their children all day. They're not answering their phones, and my son-in-law didn't show up to work, which is completely unlike him. Please, can someone check on them?" Officers arrived at the address, finding the house cloaked in an unsettling silence. The stillness was deafening, broken only by the faint glow of a single light emanating from a southwest room. The scene inside? Far from ordinary. "Thanks for coming." "Hey, I got a TV knocked over and a coffee table too," one officer reported. "We need another unit to Camden Avenue," another called in. Officers moved cautiously, peering through windows, using flashlights to cut through the oppressive darkness. Something felt off, something sinister. "Do you see anything?" "Lights are off everywhere, except for that faint one in the back." "Let's check the backyard." And then, the first horrifying discovery. Oh God. Dogs are dead. 2 dead dogs in the kitchen. "I need more units here, now." The officers' growing unease turned to dread. 2 lifeless dogs, sprawled across the kitchen floor, were their first grim clue. What could have caused this? And what, or who, might still be inside? Recognizing the dire urgency, officers determined exigent circumstances and prepared to breach the home through the unlocked back door. "Hold this," one officer said, steadying their tools. "We need at least 2 more units, front and back covered before we go in." The air was thick with tension as they coordinated their entry. Flashlights danced across the darkened windows, searching for movement, for answers, for anything that could explain this eerie stillness. What awaited them inside would defy comprehension, an unimaginable horror that would shake the community to its core. Stay with us as we uncover the shocking reason behind this unthinkable tragedy. With enough units now in place, officers prepared to force entry into the home. The weight of the unknown pressed heavily on their shoulders. "All right, we're going in." Nice and slow, the lead officer commanded, his voice steady but tinged with tension. "You hold the front. Cover this window. Everyone else, stay in formation. Watch our 6 as we clear each room." The back door creaked open, revealing an oppressive stillness inside. The air was thick, stagnant, and heavy with a foreboding sense of dread. As the officers advanced, the first signs of horror revealed themselves. "We've got 1 dead dog here," an officer called out, his flashlight catching the lifeless form sprawled across the kitchen floor. "Second dog, over there," another voice added, the tone somber. But the gruesome discoveries were only beginning. With weapons drawn, the officers moved cautiously through the house, clearing each room. In the dimly lit living room, the nightmare deepened. Lying face up in a pool of blood was the lifeless body of Alberto Rolón, later identified as the husband of the homeowner. His injuries were severe, the result of gunfire that left no chance for survival. In the southeast bedroom, the scene was even more harrowing. The door had been violently kicked in, leaving splintered wood and a large footprint as evidence of the force used. Behind it lay the body of Zoraida Bartolomei, Alberto's wife, her life brutally cut short. But the true devastation came in the discovery of the couple's 2 young sons, Diego and Adriel Rolón, found in the same room. The innocence of their young lives had been extinguished in an act of unimaginable cruelty. The home, once a place of love and laughter, had become the stage for an unthinkable massacre. The officers, hardened by years of service, struggled to process the sheer brutality of the scene. As investigators combed through the house for evidence, they discovered critical clues on Zoraida and Alberto's phones. Text messages and calls pointed them to a new lead, a connection that would take the investigation in a shocking direction. The trail led to the home of Erlinda Paloma and her boyfriend, Nathaniel Huey Jr. Police had uncovered evidence of an affair between Zoraida and Nathaniel, a revelation that added a tangled layer of complexity to the case. When officers arrived at Erlinda's residence, they were greeted cautiously. "Hello, Erlinda. My name is Detective Garcia, and this is Detective Wagner. We're with the Romeoville Police Department." Erlinda's face tightened, and her voice trembled as she responded, I know why you're here." The detectives wasted no time. "We're investigating a murder," Detective Wagner said bluntly. "We've recovered messages from phones at the crime scene. These messages reveal anger and hostility toward the victims. We need to know, could these messages lead back to you or your devices?" Erlinda hesitated, her discomfort evident. She glanced nervously at Nathaniel, who stood nearby, seemingly intent on controlling the situation. "We'd like to speak with you privately," Detective Garcia continued. Nathaniel interjected, "You can talk to her right here on the patio. It's safer with the Ring camera recording." But the detectives were determined to get Erlinda away from Nathaniel's influence. They insisted on speaking with her alone, and after some coaxing, she agreed to sit with them in the patrol car. Once inside, Erlinda's demeanor shifted. Away from Nathaniel's gaze, she began to open up, offering pieces of a story that hinted at dark motives, tangled relationships, and a shocking betrayal that had led to the tragic events in the home on Concord Avenue. What would emerge from these interviews would shake the community to its core and reveal the twisted reason behind a crime so heinous, it defied belief. The officers, determined to separate Erlinda from Nathaniel's influence, persuaded her to drive with them to a nearby park. In the safety of the patrol car, they began their delicate questioning. "Erlinda, how long have you and Nathaniel been together?" one officer asked, his tone steady but probing. "Since 2015, she responded hesitantly. Her answers were fragmented, laced with subtle contradictions. While she denied being afraid of Nathaniel, her nervous demeanor painted a different picture. "Why are you scared right now?" an officer pressed gently. "I'm not scared, but earlier, he called me, and I could hear him saying, 'Why are you following me?'" Erlinda's voice wavered as she recounted the strange exchange. The conversation turned to Nathaniel's infidelity, a history Erlinda reluctantly acknowledged. "When did you find out about his affair with Zoraida?" the detective asked. "Just now," she claimed, though her expression suggested otherwise. As the questioning deepened, Erlinda began to recount details of their troubled relationship. Stories of infidelity, jealousy, and distrust surfaced, painting a picture of a toxic and volatile partnership. But what she didn't share was the most shocking truth: Erlinda wasn't just a passive participant in this tragedy. She was its architect. Behind her seemingly innocent facade, Erlinda was orchestrating a dark and elaborate plan. Fueled by years of jealousy over Nathaniel's affairs, she had devised a scheme so twisted it defied belief. Investigators, combing through the digital evidence retrieved from the victims' phones, discovered that Erlinda had been posing as a fake hacker. She manipulated Nathaniel into believing that Zoraida was a mole in a fictional cartel. Erlinda fabricated evidence, using images sourced from the internet, spy apps installed on Nathaniel's phone, and even online translators to create messages in Bulgarian, adding layers of complexity to her deceit. Erlinda's manipulation was relentless. She convinced Nathaniel that Zoraida was a threat, someone who needed to be eliminated. Her calculated deceit led him to commit the unthinkable, the brutal murder of an entire family. With mounting evidence, investigators turned their attention to Nathaniel. They knew the key to unraveling the full story lay in his phone. If he had nothing to hide, there would be no hesitation in handing it over. When officers visited Nathaniel at his workplace, his demeanor was immediately defensive. "Nathaniel, we're just trying to clear things up," an officer began. "We've already retrieved some messages, but we need to see the rest to eliminate you as a suspect. Can we take a look at your phone?" Nathaniel hesitated, clutching his phone tightly. His voice faltered as he tried to deflect. "I don't have anything to hide, but, all the messages are already on the computer. Can't you just get them from there?" The officers pressed further, explaining that while some data could be retrieved from the computer, the most direct method was accessing his phone. "If there's nothing to worry about, this is the fastest way," one officer explained. "Otherwise, we'll have to go through the process of obtaining a search warrant." Nathaniel's unease grew. He stammered excuses, attempting to deflect the request. But the officers saw through his resistance. It was clear he was hiding something. The tension was palpable as Nathaniel grappled with the decision. Would he hand over his phone, knowing it contained the digital breadcrumbs that would expose the truth? Or would he continue to stall, buying time in the face of inevitable justice? With each passing moment, the walls were closing in on Nathaniel and Erlinda. Their web of lies, manipulation, and violence was unraveling under the relentless scrutiny of law enforcement. What began as a welfare check had evolved into a shocking case of jealousy, betrayal, and premeditated murder. And as the evidence mounted, one question loomed larger than ever: how far would someone go when consumed by envy and obsession? The truth was about to come to light, revealing the chilling motives behind one of the most heinous crimes the community had ever seen. Nathaniel's uneasiness grew with every passing moment. His reluctance to hand over his phone, coupled with his disjointed justifications, only fueled the officer's suspicions. "Nathaniel," the officer began, his tone calm yet firm, "this is about clearing your name. The fastest way to do that is by giving us access to your phone. Right now, the evidence we have paints you as the last known person connected to Zoraida. If you have nothing to hide, this process should be quick and straightforward." Nathaniel fidgeted, his grip tightening on the phone in his hand. "I get it," he replied, his voice strained. "But, you know, I've got personal stuff in there, things I don't necessarily want anyone to see." The officer leaned in slightly, maintaining eye contact. "We're not interested in your private life. We're interested in the truth. If you didn't do anything wrong, this will only prove your innocence. But the longer you stall, the more it looks like you're hiding something." Nathaniel's excuses became increasingly desperate. "How about I come down to the station later? After work? I'll let you look at it then." The officer sighed, clearly sensing the evasion. "Nathaniel, you know as well as I do that this delay doesn't help your case. If anything, it raises more questions. Deleting anything now, texts, photos, anything, will only make you look guilty. The system will show us everything, even what was erased." Nathaniel's face flushed, his defenses crumbling under the weight of the officer's logic. "I haven't opened my Snapchat in months," he muttered, trying to deflect. "Then what's the harm in letting us take a look now?" the officer countered, his patience unwavering. "We're here to help you. But every second you delay, every excuse you give, makes it harder to believe your innocence." The conversation was a tense psychological chess match. The officers applied subtle pressure, maintaining an air of professionalism while making it clear they weren't buying Nathaniel's excuses. "Nathaniel, listen to me," the officer said, his tone shifting to one of earnestness. "I'm not here to threaten you or trap you. I'm here to find out what happened to Zoraida and her family. If you weren't involved, then help us prove it. But if you keep stalling like this, it'll only make things worse." Nathaniel finally sighed, his shoulders slumping under the weight of the moment. "Fine. I'll come by the station after work," he repeated weakly. The officers exchanged a glance, knowing this wasn't ideal but understanding that they had planted seeds of doubt in Nathaniel's mind. "All right," the officer said, handing him a card. "You have the address. But remember, Nathaniel, time is of the essence. If there's nothing to hide, there's no reason to wait." As the officers left, Nathaniel was visibly shaken. His decision to withhold his phone was a gamble, and he knew the clock was ticking. Every move he made from this point forward would be scrutinized, and the truth was edging closer to the surface. Back at the station, investigators prepared for the next phase. They knew Nathaniel's hesitance wasn't just about privacy, it was about hiding something far more sinister. The evidence against him and Erlinda was growing, and soon, the full extent of their twisted plot would come to light. Erlinda, the puppet master pulling the strings, had crafted a story so elaborate that it initially shielded her from suspicion. But as the digital trail was pieced together, her role became undeniable. And Nathaniel, entangled in her web of lies and manipulation, was now on the verge of collapse under the pressure. The officers knew one thing for certain: the truth was coming, and when it did, the horrors behind Zoraida's murder would be revealed in devastating detail. Nathaniel agreed to the cheek swab, his compliance an effort to dispel suspicion. But his discomfort was evident. Even though he erased all of his messages before turning over his phone, he seemed unaware that such deletions were never truly permanent. The officers knew that the data recovery process would unveil whatever secrets he had tried to bury. "Do you have anything to do with this?" the officer had asked earlier, his tone direct yet steady. Nathaniel's hesitation before answering spoke volumes. "No," he finally muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The officer nodded, taking note of the faltering response. "You know we're going to find your number in her phone," he continued. "We'll retrieve the messages, the Snapchat logs, everything. If there's anything you think we should know now, anything at all, this is your chance to tell us before we uncover it ourselves." Nathaniel's eyes darted around the room, his nervous energy betraying him. "We weren't fighting. I mean, nothing serious. Just normal stuff," he said, his words tumbling out in fragments. But the officers had heard similar denials before, and they knew better than to take his words at face value. The investigation was still in its early stages, and the officers were meticulous in their approach. With every question, they inched closer to the truth, carefully piecing together the fragments of the story. Nathaniel, for his part, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. "Would you be willing to take a polygraph test if needed?" one officer asked. Nathaniel hesitated before replying. "I guess," he said, the uncertainty in his voice unmistakable. "What about a DNA swab?" Another pause. "Yeah. I mean, I guess so," he repeated, his tone wavering. The officers exchanged a glance, their suspicions mounting. They knew the value of these preliminary conversations, where subtle cues and evasions often spoke louder than words. Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his defenses beginning to falter under the relentless questioning. "Look," he said, "I didn't think her family even knew about us. I mean, we kept things pretty quiet." The officer leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Somebody knew, Nathaniel. That's why we're here talking to you. And the more honest you are with us now, the better it will be for you in the long run." Nathaniel swallowed hard, his hands fidgeting in his lap. I don't know what else to tell you," he stammered. The officer slid a business card across the table. "If you think of anything at all, give me a call," he said. "We'll be in touch, and we'll be following up soon." As Nathaniel left the station, his mind raced. The officers had planted seeds of doubt, and he could feel the walls closing in. Back at the station, the recovered data from Nathaniel's phone began to reveal a chilling narrative. Deleted messages and Snapchat exchanges painted a picture of a volatile and deeply troubling relationship. Tensions, threats, and cryptic conversations hinted at a hidden layer of the story, one that Nathaniel had desperately tried to conceal. Even more damning was the connection to Erlinda. Her orchestrations, manipulations, and fabricated personas were woven throughout the recovered communications. As the evidence mounted, it became clear that Nathaniel had been a pawn in her twisted game, but his hands were far from clean. With each passing day, the investigators grew closer to unraveling the full extent of the conspiracy. The DNA results, the digital footprints, and the testimonies were all converging toward a singular, horrifying truth. Nathaniel and Erlinda's carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble, and the weight of their actions was catching up with them. The officers knew it was only a matter of time before the dam broke. The truth, however horrifying, was within reach, and justice was closing in fast. The stage was set for a revelation that would shock everyone involved. Nathaniel's demeanor shifted uneasily as the officers pressed him further. Though his words seemed cooperative on the surface, there was a subtle undercurrent of defensiveness, a veil of unease that even his rehearsed answers couldn't entirely conceal. "Yeah, if I hear anything, I'll let you know," Nathaniel mumbled, his voice faltering as he pocketed the officer's card. His attempt to appear helpful only deepened their suspicions. But what Nathaniel didn't know, or perhaps didn't fully grasp, was that the officers already had enough to begin unraveling the sinister web he and Erlinda had spun. From Nathaniel's recovered phone data, the puzzle pieces began falling into place. The deleted messages revealed something far more sinister than just a messy love triangle. They exposed a cold and calculated plan, one meticulously orchestrated by Ermelinda, who had posed as a shadowy and threatening figure to manipulate Nathaniel into becoming her pawn. Ermelinda's fake online persona, bolstered by photos pulled from obscure internet corners and phrases translated into multiple languages, was designed to convince Nathaniel that Zoraida was a mole in a fictional cartel. Erlinda's carefully crafted deception preyed on Nathaniel's insecurities and his desperation for her approval. Through weeks of text exchanges, Erlinda's fabricated character issued escalating threats and fed Nathaniel false intelligence. Messages like, "Zoraida's betrayal could bring everyone down. She knows too much," pushed Nathaniel into a corner. By the time Ermelinda planted the final seed, that eliminating Zoraida was the only way to ensure their safety, Nathaniel had been drawn so deeply into her web of manipulation that he saw no way out. The recovered data also revealed the horrifying depth of their planning. Conversations between Nathaniel and Ermelinda were filled with coded language, instructions, and contingencies. They discussed logistics, ensured alibis were secure, and even rehearsed their Plan B in case something went wrong. It was in these exchanges that Ermelinda's dominance over Nathaniel became strikingly clear. Her messages dripped with cold calculation, "You know what needs to be done. Stop hesitating. This is survival, not a choice." Nathaniel's replies, though filled with uncertainty, always ended with submission. "I'll take care of it. Just tell me what to do." But in their arrogance, they underestimated the investigators' ability to piece together the digital trail they had left behind. While Ermelinda believed she had erased all traces of her involvement, the forensic analysis of both Nathaniel's and her own phone painted a damning picture. Not only had she manipulated Nathaniel into carrying out the act, but she had also been actively monitoring his location and communications to ensure he didn't stray from her carefully laid plans. The officers began to see Ermelinda for what she truly was, the mastermind behind the crime, orchestrating it all from the shadows while ensuring her own hands remained ostensibly clean. When the officers confronted Nathaniel with the recovered data, his resolve began to crack. Presented with undeniable evidence of his complicity, and Ermelinda's role in manipulating him, his initial denials gave way to half-hearted justifications. "She said it was the only way," Nathaniel muttered, his voice breaking. "I didn't think I had a choice." But the officers weren't buying it. "You had a choice every step of the way, Nathaniel," one officer said coldly. "And you chose to go along with it." Faced with mounting pressure, Nathaniel began to implicate Ermelinda, though he stopped short of admitting his full role in the murders. "She planned it all," he claimed. "She told me what to do." As investigators prepared to bring Ermelinda in for questioning, they knew they were dealing with a manipulator of the highest order. Her ability to weave lies, create identities, and control those around her was unlike anything they'd encountered before. But what Ermelinda didn't realize was that her time was running out. The evidence against her, and Nathaniel, was overwhelming, and the walls of her carefully constructed narrative were about to come crashing down. This was no longer a case of a tragic crime of passion. It was a chilling tale of manipulation, betrayal, and cold-blooded murder, and the truth was finally coming to light. The reckoning was near. If you're captivated by stories like this and want more gripping content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Your support keeps these stories coming.